Okay, so the Crowdstrike root cause analysis for channel file 291, which is the one that blue screened I don't know how many computers around the world, has been released. And kind of as we expected, there was an attempt to access memory that had not been allocated. And generally, what they're saying is that in the file that made it out into production, there were 21 criteria that it was looking at, but the software had only allocated an array for 20. Something similar to that, anyway. And then what happens in software is that when you try to access that 21st, there is a memory error and you're blocked and you're killed. And we talked about how in the previous video, this is all running in kernel space. So when the kill happens, it kills the whole kernel. And it kills the operating system, essentially. It exits. And I've seen people saying, I don't understand, just because there's an error, why does it exit? Well, the reason it exits is that, and this is a decision, okay? The reason it exits is that now the kernel is in a state where it cannot be depended upon because something has tried to access memory that it's not supposed to be accessing. And so it's kind of undetermined what could happen. And you cannot really guarantee that whatever is causing this is like just a small thing and you just ignore it. Because then what ends up happening is that potentially memory gets overwritten, data gets corrupted, and really, really bad long-term things happen rather than the system simply exiting. And when the system exits, the thing that happens generally is that anything that hasn't been flushed out to the disk or flushed out to the cache to the disk is now missing. That's the worst part of it. This is usually causes when the operating system comes back out. There's some data that's out of order, but we have these things called journals in the file system now, and so it just replays through that journal to get everything up to snuff. And it's not as bad as it used to be, where you would just find files in the lost and found in Unix, for example, and you would have to figure out where those files came from. But that's it's much better to simply stop than to risk corrupting everything that's attached to your host, right? But anyway, that's the root cause analysis about this file. But it goes further. The next thing is that that actual file was not tested. It looks like they tested with different. Well, they were saying that there were wildcards used in the 21st input, and so in testing it passed, right? They feel that the testing didn't include a runtime array bounds check, okay? That's makes sense. And they feel that the testing should cover a wider variety of matching criteria. That's good. There's a logic error in the content validator, that's for sure. There's a little bit of details here about the template instance validation should expand to include testing with the content interpreter. We're getting into just like their software and how it works and how you test it. Next one is they feel it should have staged deployment. Well, this is... Now we're getting into the actual root cause. And by stage deployment, that means you roll it out a bit, make sure everything's okay, and then you go further and further out. And that is one way of looking at things. And then there's background and terminology. But the reason I was saying that the stage deployment, we're getting close to the root cause, is that the actual root cause is that you're making changes in kernel space without A, staging them, and B, allowing customers to force you to put it into their staging environment. And I find this to be really fascinating. But maybe I'm old, right? But if I were a customer, I'd be saying, no, you're never pushing anything directly to my hosts. Here is my testing environment. and we will make sure that this works with all of our software, and we have rules about how long we soak it, and we do this with the operating system itself. We do not allow automated updates of the operating system on mission critical stuff, and we'll put it in there, we will test it, and then we will push it out to our production. That seems to make sense to me. That's absolutely where you want to be with this. But they're saying here stage deployment. Now, I also mentioned kernel updaters previously, and I did some research into that, and they do stage deployment. So it's up to you as an engineer or whatever at your organization. Are stage deployments that are going to other places good enough for you, or do you want to actually test the updates that are going into kernel space? That's what it really comes down to. But yes, the root cause of this is a design failure from the get-go, where they even had the possibility to force an update in kernel space without customers having the ability to test, or without any stage deployment. That's the problem. Whoever made the mistake, they made a mistake, whatever. The root cause is that there's the ability for that mistake to bring down all these hosts. So that's my feeling on it. I think it's hubris. I think there's so much, and I'm not saying this company, I'm saying there's so much of it right now in the industry. And I was saying before that these are decisions that engineers wouldn't make, because typically engineers are very concerned about mistakes and what impact they may have. So anyway, that's it. It was very interesting to read all this, and I know everyone's really sick of the Crowdstrike thing, and they're assuming it's just never going to happen now because they've learned their lesson. Well, until they have solved all of this about stage deployment and potentially having you, the customer, testing it before it gets pushed out into production, there's still some risk there, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion, and I'm not all that smart. If I were smart, I would have been warning you about this before it happened. Anyway, have a good evening. Thanks for watching.